In this video, I will be ranking the top 10 most brilliant military strategists in all of Star Wars. Of course, this is just my opinion, and feel free to leave your own list in the comments, but now, let's begin. The first of two bonus entries on this list is Maximilian Veers, and the reason he's only a bonus entry is because I genuinely just forgot about him, and then realized, oh, I forgot Veers 10 minutes before finishing this video. So, just acknowledging him. Maybe eventually I'll do a full video on him, but this is just like a mini acknowledgement of the character. Now moving on to the bonus entry that I actually remember to do. The second bonus entry on this list goes to Gilad Pellaeon. Pellaeon was born on Corellia and soon gained the rank of captain in the Imperial Navy. In canon, he commanded the ISD Harbinger in Grand Admiral Savitz's Third Fleet. When Savitz's traitorous plans were revealed, Pellaeon helped defeat him and was moved into Grand Admiral Thrawn's Seventh Fleet. Shortly after transferring into the Seventh Fleet, he replaced Commodore Pharaoh as the Chimera's captain, serving directly under Thrawn. During his service, he participated in multiple battles, and though he was notably missing during the Battle of Atollon, he was present during the final Battle of Lothal, where he commanded the Harbinger again and helped blockade the planet, successfully managing to destroy all of the rebel fighters except two. During the Purgle attack, the Seventh Fleet was completely decimated. The few ships that survived were incredibly damaged, and that included the Harbinger. Later, we see Pellaeon in the Imperial Remnant Council, and while we don't see much of his tactical ability in canon, in Legends it has a much more storied life. He once again was born on Corellia and joined the Navy quite young, gaining the command of his first ship, being the Chimera, during the Battle of Endor. At the end of the battle, it was Pellaeon who officially called the retreat order, and from that time onwards, he became very prominent, respected by almost all members of the Imperial Remnant. It's because of this that Thrawn would end up selecting him to serve under him during his campaign against the New Republic. During this time, he proved that he had the makings of a great tactician. While he often was confused by the Grand Admiral's strategies, he almost always picked them up after just a few moments. After Thrawn's death, he became the supreme leader of the Empire, and proved to be a great leader and tactician. One key example of this is when he was able to deduce if a quote-unquote rebel task force commanded by Garm Iblis was indeed commanded by the rebels. He used a rebel strategy created by General Iblis, and since the task force that was attacking his ship was unable to defend against it, he was able to deduce that it wasn't actually Garm Iblis who was leading the assault. Later, he also used strategies that Thrawn had used during his campaign, and was even able to deduce the captains of the ships simply by their tactics, something that famously Thrawn was known for. In the end, Pellaeon was assassinated after he refused to join Darth Cadious's Sith Empire. He also kind of predicted that, and I think that was less of a failure on his part and more just a testament to the strength of Darth Cadio's Sith Empire. Also, quick apology for the amount of stuttering that I just did. I don't know what it is, but reading off of scripts has always been kind of hard for me, or like reading a quote from a book. I'm very good at writing scripts and rehearsing them in my head. Once I actually have to say them on camera, I'm not very good at it, so apologies there. Anyways, moving on to number 10, which is the first person on our actual main list. This is actually the same general that I mentioned in the kind of last entry, and he's actually considered one of the most intelligent rebel leaders in Legends. He was a politician before the rise of the Empire, and before the rise of the Empire, he was actually the senator for Corellia. When the Clone Wars began, he vowed to stay out of the war, but when the Empire came into power, he knew he had to do something. He would speak out against Palpatine until the Empire killed his entire family, including his Imperial supporter wife, and that was the real turning point for Bell. he would go into hiding and use his resources to fight the Empire with the large rebellion. And around the time that the first Death Star was destroyed, Iblis would have a big fight with Mon Mothma, and the two of them would kind of fall out. And Bell would go and start his own kind of separate rebellion. During the time of the Thrawn campaign, Iblis would be contacted by Han Solo and would join the New Republic to help fight against Thrawn. And he would do this pretty well during this time. While he would not directly engage with Thrawn, he did personally destroy a couple of Thrawn's smaller warships during multiple battles. During the Ka-Moth conflict, he would command a new task force and would once again prove to be a match for most Imperials, even managing to get into a tie with Pellaeon during one of his assaults on an Imperial world. He would also end up fighting in the Yuuzhan Vong War before going into retirement. In canon, his story has been almost completely altered, and he's been referenced once or twice, but for all intents and purposes, he barely exists anymore. A lot of people don't even know if he's now in canon still, like, the senator for Corellia. That's up for debate. And while Iblis definitely proved himself to be a skilled officer, creating so many strategies and really winning so much battles, honestly, being one of the best tacticians, he's not as good as others. He's definitely far above most admirals, but I also think he's limited because in all the stories he was in, he had to be worse than people like Thrawn and things like that. Also, fun fact, Garm Iblis is in the Force Unleashed games. Anyways, moving on to number 9. Admiral Al-Alani of the Chiss Expansion Air Defense Force was born in 62 BBY to the name okay, I'm just gonna put the name on screen. I cannot pronounce that. Admiral Al-Alani is a Chiss, like Thrawn, and is considered one of the best tacticians in the Chiss Expansionary Defense Fleet. Unlike many Chiss officers, she really valued adaptability and foresight, recognizing the genius of Thrawn while maintaining her own independent command. While Thrawn is exiled and joins the Empire, Al-Alani remains with the Ascendancy, using her tactical mind to defend her people from hidden threats like the Grisk. While she is no better of a tactician than someone like Iblis, she has the same ability Pellaeon has when it comes to learning from Thrawn's genius and being able to catch on easily and then use those strategies, which, is very important because one of the greatest things for learning about anything, really, is to be able to learn from other people and be able to comprehend their own strategies, in a way. Admiral Al-Alani is a part of Legends, but they're really only a side character, appearing in the Outbound Flight novel and a little bit during the Yuuzhan Vong War, but again, they're not really a notable character. We mostly see them in canon, especially in the New Thrawn trilogy and the Ascendancy trilogy, and we really get to see their background and their tactical ability. Admiral Alani was born into the powerful Irizi. I cannot pronounce any Chiss words or names, so I'm just gonna skip over that. Just Google it, because I cannot pronounce it. Anyways, this is one of the largest ruling families / ruling houses of the Ascendancy, and she showed exceptional strategic ability from a young age and was selected for military training. However, in the rigid Chiss society, loyalty to the Ascendancy often came before family ties, and so to fully commit to her service, she underwent the Trial of Severance, a process that stripped her of her family name and status, and so she became just Al-Alani instead of that name I previously showed you that I cannot pronounce. Anyways, I'm gonna stop talking about this character, because my brain is hurting and I do not understand how to pronounce these just names. I'm sorry, I can read them, but the second I actually have to pronounce them, I have no idea. Admiral Gilad Ackbar was a Mon Calamari tactician who served for the Alliance to restore the Republic, and then the Resistance until his death in 34 ABY. He was born on the planet Mon Cala and served as the captain of the Mon Calamari Royal Guard. During his time in this title, he fought in battles alongside Jedi Generals Kit Fisto, Anakin Skywalker, and his Padawan Ahsoka Tano. He would prove himself as a able-bodied leader and combatant in this conflict, taking the position of military advisor to the Mon Cala King Li Char. At the end of the Clone Wars, Mon Cala would pledge their support of the Rebel Alliance, and Ackbar would join the Rebel Alliance, along with a multitude of ships from the Mon Calamari fleet. After the death of Admiral Raddus at the Battle of Scarif, he would take command as the supreme commander of all of the Rebel Alliance's forces, notably commanding Home 1 during the Battle of Endor. He would then join the New Republic and become the supreme leader of all of their forces, specifically the Navy forces, also writing a multitude of training books and really just helping define what it was the New Republic military was. But in Legends and Canon, his roles after this kind of change. In Canon, he would join the Resistance, before getting probably the most disrespectful death in all of Star Wars. In Legends, he would actually stay with the New Republic for almost his entire life, helping defeat 2 separate Grand Admirals, and really earning his title. He would eventually go into retirement, but then come out of retirement to fight the Yuuzhan Vong, dying at the ripe age of 92, which is crazy considering that means that he would be fighting pretty much from when he was in his early 20s up to 92. Of course, most of that would be spent on a ship, and a good chunk of that would be spent on in retirement, pretty much. But I think that really speaks to his capabilities as a leader, that he could literally be spending so much of his life fighting, and then he'd be that useful of a leader that they would bring him out of retirement at age like 80. Actually, no, technically, that's the Yuuzhan Vong didn't last that long. Never mind, ignoring that. Anyways, both in Legend and Canon, he would write a bunch of manuals, as I said earlier, mainly the notable one being the Manual for Fleet Tactics and Combat Methodology. Admiral Ackbar is one of the most intelligent Navy commanders in galactic history, and he managed to design some of the most successful battle plans in Star Wars history. And while his accomplishments are more impressive in Legends, either versions of the character are incredibly talented. But I didn't put him above the later commanders in this video, because while we hear a lot about how brilliant of a leader he is, in my personal opinion, the actual strategies he uses are pretty basic. And while he's supposed to be really brilliant, I just don't think his strategies are actually that crazy. No offense to Ackbar. Anyways, moving on to number 7. This entry might seem a bit odd since Grievous in the Clone Wars is a bit of a coward, but he's actually a pretty good tactician. Our focus is normally centered around the general killing Jedi, but he was actually the supreme commander of the Separatist military for a reason. While in the Clone Wars he loses almost every battle we see him in, if you look at the Labyrinth of Evil book, we learn that General Grievous actually won way more battles than he ended up losing. If you just look at statistics, he actually won like 70% of all the battles he participated in, which is kinda crazy. while he was a decent tactician, the real kind of thing I want to talk about is how well he was able to organize the CIS military and navy. At the start of the Clone Wars, the CIS navy and military was basically about 100 or so private droid armies and private militias. And Grievous really was able to take all of that and put them into one cohesive force, mixing all the different companies' separate droid units into a one, larger force, and able to kind of transform the variation in the droid army from being a weakness to a strength. Because, when you have so many different companies and so many different droid types and ship types, it's pretty hard to arm them all. Grievous was able to really make it so they could successfully arm their armies and keep everything working well. And yes, the Sith were backing Grievous, but he single-handedly still had to bring all of these militaries into one single unit. And we actually see all these small droid armies working together in the Clone Wars as one cohesive force. Interestingly enough, most of the different droids you see are from different companies. The B-1 and B-2 were designed by different groups. The B-1s being designed by the Trade Federation and the Geonosians, while the B-2s, I can't actually remember what company designed them, but it wasn't one of those companies. So arming everyone in this conflict was really a logistical nightmare, and while the Separatists were in kind of this disadvantage with all of their different factions, Grievous turned them into a well-oiled machine that could really function well. Also, no pun intended about the well-oiled machine thing. And yes, Grievous in the Clone Wars is less capable, and because of that, I kind of have to put him at 7th place. I just can't justify putting him any higher, to be honest. Our 6th spot goes to the Count of Sereno, Count Dooku, also known as Darth Tyrannus. While Dooku has about the same level of battlefield experience as many of the previous people mentioned, they're all basically at the same level of tactics. Dooku even might be slightly below some of them. I put him up here because he is genuinely probably one of the best politicians I know of in all of Star Wars or just in real life. The way he's able to kind of convince people that what he wants, or basically what Darth Sidious wants, which is what he's kind of enforcing, is what the people he's trying to convince wants. That made no sense, but just gonna roll with it. He has this way with politics and with people, and he's just obviously kind of quite convincing, because he was really able to rile up people and make them to want to serve and fight with the Separatist Alliance. And to be honest, I'm on a time crunch to finish this video. So much of this video was written in the span of 2 days, and you'll definitely see that with some of the later entries. But I'm just gonna skip over this. This is really because I didn't have anyone else to put here, but I do think he's genuinely a pretty good leader and tactician. Maybe not worth where I put him, but at the time I was really struggling to find people to put on this list because I decided to make it a top 10 list. But anyways, moving on to the next character. Shut up. I'm joking, alright. Anyways, now I'm actually gonna start. I'm just rambling at this point. Okay. Moving on to our number 5th spot. My 5th spot on this list goes to Sky Guy himself. Anakin Skywalker is a brilliant improviser, and while his strategies are pretty dumb most of the time, when we see him in the Clone Wars, he is constantly pulling the most random strategies out of thin air, and they always work. Now, you might say that he just has crazy plot armor, but I would say this shows his brilliance. He is constantly facing seemingly undefeatable forces, but he uses the worst plans that never should work, but they always work perfectly. His strategies don't feel brilliant, often way too simplified to ever work in any real scenario, but they do work. And that's what makes his strategies really brilliant. Because they feel way too simple to work, but they just work. And they have really, either way too many moving parts or way too little moving parts, which are all things you kind of want to have a mix between, because if you have no moving parts, it probably won't work. But if you have too many moving parts, then it just becomes overcomplicated and it probably won't work. But he kind of has this little balance where his plans are so simplistic with 0 moving parts, but also, enough moving parts where they still work. I don't know, it's really interesting how he uses these tactics. And then later, when he actually becomes Darth Vader, he does kind of stop commanding as actively, but I think that's more of the fact that he doesn't really need to be, an active tactician anymore, even though, he still is an active tactician for the most part. He's still an amazing tactician. He just doesn't lead as much because he knows he doesn't really have to because he's commanding a giant fleet of Star Destroyers. So it doesn't really matter if he pulls this crazy strategy because he'll know he'll win either way. There isn't really any, stopping Vader, and he knows that. When it comes to the CIS, he would be facing, hordes of enemies that he couldn't normally defeat, but when he joined the Empire, there was no real force that could stand up to him. Alright, moving on to number 4. We see Admiral Trench in a few Clone Wars episodes, finally dying in Season 7, but during the time that we see him, we hear about how good of a tactician he is, and we see some of his tactics during the Clone Wars. Trench was superb at psychological warfare, being deeply feared by many, especially Lauren. Also, on a side note, his voice kind of reminds me of Count Dooku. Just thought that was a interesting thing. Anyways, during the first episodes of the Clone Wars, where we actually see Trench, the Jedi originally lose their first attack on Trench's blockade. And as they're retreating, Yularen looks at all the info about Trench's tactics and devises a strategy to destroy the Separatist fleet. The Republic uses a special stealth ship to defeat Admiral Trench and blow up his flagship. And while the ship was destroyed, Trench survived and came back during the Battle of Ringo Vinda. At the start of the battle, the Republic forces were doing well, but soon they got fighting Trench's forces in this kind of large supply room-looking thing. The battle was finally halted by the death of a Jedi general at the hands of Clone Trooper Tup, and because of this, Trench was able to take initiative and win the battle for the Separatists. We finally see Trench in the Bad Batch, focused part of Season 7, fighting on Anaxis, kind of commanding the full force. And it's actually here that he dies, as Anakin Skywalker ends up killing him. But I really would say that most of the reason that Trench died was because Wat Tambor failed to alert Admiral Trench about the escape, kind of the freeing of Clone Trooper Echo, who was acting as kind of like a tactical advisor thing. I don't know how to describe what happened to Echo. When he was being forced to plan strategies for the CIS. You all know what I'm talking about. Anyways, during this time, he actually combined Echo's strategies and his own tactical knowledge to try and outsmart the clones and the Jedi, and he did really well, originally succeeding in this, beating almost every enemy. And he only really stopped being able to outsmart his opponents once Echo was rescued, but then also the clones started feeding him false information, false strategies, basically. And I really think this all shows the brilliance of Trench in a way, because all of the battles we see him in, he's winning until the clones pull out this kind of crazy strategy, or in case of Battle of Ringo Vinda, until there's a mistake that happens and he's able to then claim the battle. If it wasn't for that stealth ship or the false information from Echo, Trench would have won all of these battles, and I think that kind of just shows the brilliance of Trench, as I've been saying, because the only reason he's able to lose is because of these kind of outside things that, I don't know, maybe it's a stretch, but I would personally say that all of this shows just how brilliant Trench is. And now let's move on to our number 3 spot. My number 3 spot is Grand Moff Tarkin. The native of Eriadu started out his early teenage years on the Carrion Plateau, which is basically just a pure wilderness area of Eriadu, and this was because of some big old Tarkin family tradition where all of the teens had to basically survive in the wilderness and fight big cats. So you might say that he was a little bit traumatized by this, and this really kind of shaped Tarkin's entire life, and he would end up becoming very, very, very violent and calculating later in life. Once he was in his 18-year-old age, I don't know why I said it like that, I did, but anyways, he ended up joining a militia of sorts called the Outlands Region Security Force, which was kind of an unofficial military defense force for the planets in the Eriadu sector. During this time, he would successfully defeat many pirate groups, including Quana's Marauders, a group considered almost impossible to predict. After finishing his time with this security force, he would join the Republic Judicial Forces. I did not say that right, I am sorry. I'm not good at reading from a script. Anyways, he would prove himself a very capable fighter, both on the grounds and in ships. And eventually he would actually meet Palpatine, who would recognize the kind of aura that Tarkin had. Not in the brain rot way, just like... Never mind. Anyways, Tarkin would be convinced by Palpatine to go into politics. And with Palpatine's support, Tarkin would actually run for governor of Eriadu, eventually winning the title. During the Clone Wars, Tarkin would become a captain and later an admiral, before joining the Special Weapons Group and working on the Death Star. Of course, even Tarkin probably didn't know what he was working on, but because he worked on this project for about a year, he was actually promoted to Adjunct General, which gave him a little bit more political privilege and also allowed him to preside over the court case where Ahsoka was being on trial for the whole bombing on the Jedi Temple scenario. When the Empire began to rise, Tarkin would gain incredible power, quickly becoming Grand Moff and being one of the most powerful people in the whole Empire, even though there were actually multiple titles higher than Grand Moff. Tarkin would pretty much be untouchable, being an advisor of sorts to Palpatine. Tarkin would also keep his governorship of Eriadu, while also becoming the governor for the entire Outer Rim. And he would really also do so much other stuff. He would found the Tarkin Initiative and help design the TIE Fighter, and really just do so much for the Empire. And while, yes, he was an absolute psychopath, it's hard to say that he wasn't good at what he did, even if he really didn't understand how the human mind worked with the whole ruling through fear thing. Wasn't his best move, to be honest. Anyways, there is a lot more to Tarkin's story, but, this is mostly about their people's tactical abilities, and most of it's summed up in the book titled just Tarkin, so I would highly advise reading that or just going on to Wikipedia or watching a video on Tarkin's life. But anyways, talking more about Tarkin's actual tactical ability, most of the time you actually see him on the ground, he does pretty well, and while I definitely wouldn't say that Tarkin should be the one writing your military doctrine, he definitely was a good tactician and commander and politician. Again, didn't understand people, but he was good at outsmarting them, and things like that. Now it's time to move on to our number 2 spot. My number 2 spot goes to good old Palpatine, because, well, I kinda had to. While we don't know much about his military tactics, he is definitely a good political leader and manipulator, being just really incredibly persuasive as a politician and just in everything. His planning is literally so genius, and while maybe he can't plan out big battles himself, he does know how to use his commanders to result in what he wants. He knows how to pick the right people to do what he wants, an ability that Krennic also was very good at. Though I didn't put Krennic on this list because he definitely had a bunch of flaws, though he definitely was a very competent officer, just probably wasn't the most tactically or politically competent person out there. Maybe also I will talk about Krennic at some point. But I think really one of the biggest examples of Palpatine's brilliance is the whole Battle of Coruscant, where he's kidnapped, well, quote-unquote kidnapped, but is also able to make it so that he's able to escape with the help of the Jedi perfectly. And really, so many people in the Separatist Alliance wouldn't want to lose certain battles. But he's able to plan it out so that they do lose the battles that he wants them to lose. And he's also able to make it so the Republic loses certain battles and stuff like that. And maybe it's a bit of a stretch to put him on a tactical leaders list. I just had to put him on here because it's Palpatine. He's literally regarded as one of the most intelligent people in Star Wars. Him and Thrawn are oftentimes considered the 2 most intelligent people in all of Star Wars. So I kind of just had to put him on this list. Anyways, I am now going to talk about the number 1 spot. I think there really is only one character who can get this number 1 spot. My number 1 spot just kind of had to go to Grand Admiral Thrawn. He is probably the only person who could have made the top 1 spot in this list. I mean, when I think of tactics, in Star Wars specifically, I immediately think of Grand Admiral Thrawn. And throughout all of Star Wars, we see Thrawn have so many brilliant strategies. And while a legend, Thrawn used a lot more unorthodox strategies. For example, literally turning his Star Destroyer, sideways so people couldn't see the kind of TIE fighters going out the back. It's really he's just brilliant in either Legends or Canon. Definitely, I think, in Legends we see a lot more, crazy feats that Thrawn does, but in Canon we have incredibly crazy feats too, just as much so. So, honestly, I think Thrawn is really just a self-explanatory great tactician. Just look at any of the battles he's in, and he's pretty genius, to be honest. Definitely in Rebels, some of his strategies aren't as good as they are in other places, but if you're looking at the new Thrawn trilogy, the OG Thrawn trilogy, the Ascendancy trilogy, pretty much anything that Thrawn appears in, he's absolutely brilliant. I actually have made another video on Thrawn before. I'll link it in the description. It's about why Thrawn is such a good Star Wars villain, and I talk a little bit about his tactical ability there. I also don't want to talk a lot about Thrawn because I'm assuming everybody knows who he is. And if not, you should probably watch the video because, of course, it's more about the broad strokes of best tacticians and less about the actual life of that character. But honestly, Thrawn is just completely amazing. If I had one fault for the character, it's that he is not a good politician, especially in Canon. He's absolutely horrible at, getting what he wants when it comes to politics. Completely clueless in that way. But other than that, he's a really brilliant character, and I think his military leadership is really unparalleled. Anyways, since this video is getting long, and I have to upload it today, or else, I will die, probably. I'm gonna end this off early, but I advise watching that video maybe, and maybe I'll release a new video on the character sometime soon, as that other video is quite old. Anyways, thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing, liking. If you have any other video ideas, leave them in the comments or join my Discord server. I know I've been plugging it a lot recently, but I've been trying to get more people to join it. I'm also looking for moderators for that server. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Sorry about the editing quality. I've been having a lot of problems with Premiere, just like lowering the quality of the gameplay and the images I have in the background. I've been actually talking to one of my film teachers at my school currently about how to like fix these issues. I'm actually going to talk to him, I'm hoping, tomorrow, which will be a Wednesday for me. But yeah, thank you for watching so much. Thank you for watching this video, and with that, peace out. Also, again, sorry for the rambling. Anyways, peace out.